For Cassandra Dunn, a 26-year-old waitress swimming in a sea of debt kindness was a reflex she couldn't afford. But when a young soldier with haunted eyes and empty pockets sat in her section, a ghost of her own painful past, she made a choice. A choice that cost her the one thing she couldn't lose: her job. This isn't just a story about a free meal. It's the true account of how a $60 act of compassion in a forgotten diner ignited a fire that would reach the highest, most untouchable towers of corporate America, proving that sometimes the person with the least to give can change everything. The fluorescent lights of the Evergreen Grill and Bar hummed a monotonous tune, a sound Cassandra Cassie Dunn had long ago learned to ignore. It was the soundtrack to her life, the steady, draining hum of just getting by. Tuesday nights were the worst. The post-work rush had dwindled to a few stragglers nursing cups of coffee, and the cavernous restaurant felt emptier, the silence amplifying the anxieties buzzing in Cassie's own head. Her mother's prescription copay was due Thursday. The transmission in her beat-up 2008 Ford Focus was making a sound like a bag of angry cats. The numbers just weren't adding up. She was refilling the salt shakers, her movements automatic, after 3 years of this, when the bell above the door chimed softly. A young man stood there hesitating for a moment before stepping inside. He was tall and lean with a jawline that seemed too sharp for his face. He wore a simple grey t-shirt and jeans, but it was the military-style haircut and the way he held himself, a rigid stillness, an alert posture, even in the relaxed diner that told her he was a soldier. It was his eyes, though, that snagged her attention. They were a deep, tired blue, scanning the room, not with curiosity, but with a kind of cautious appraisal, as if assessing threats in a room full of ketchup bottles and laminated menus. He slid into a booth in her section, the one by the window that was notorious for its wobble. Cassie grabbed a menu and a glass of water, pasting on her professional smile. "Welcome to the Evergreen. Can I get you started with something to drink while you look over the menu?" "Just the water is fine for now, thank you, ma'am," he said. His voice was quiet with a slight rasp. She watched him as he studied the menu, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked so young, maybe a few years younger than her own 26. He reminded her painfully of her brother Michael. The same serious set to his shoulders, the same way his gaze seemed to look through things instead of at them. Michael had had that look after his first tour. He never lost it. The soldier ordered the lumberjack's feast, a plate piled high with steak eggs, pancakes, and home fries. It was one of their most expensive items, a choice that seemed at odds with his solitary, almost somber demeanor. Cassie punched it into the system, her mind already calculating. A $24.99 plate plus a drink and tax. A good tip on that could make a real dent in the pharmacy bill. She pushed the thought away, ashamed. She served him his meal, and he ate with a slow, methodical determination, as if he were refueling rather than enjoying the food. He never once looked at his phone. He just ate and stared out the window at the passing traffic, lost in a world she couldn't begin to imagine. Cassie found herself checking on him more than necessary, a strange protective instinct stirring in her chest. "Everything tasting okay?" she asked, approaching to refill his water. He startled slightly, his eyes snapping to hers. For a second, the distant look was gone, replaced by a raw, unguarded vulnerability. It's the best meal I've had in a year," he said, and the sincerity in his voice was a physical blow. "Thank you." "Of course," she said, her smile feeling a little more genuine this time. When he was finished, he stacked his plates neatly at the edge of the table. "Check, please, ma'am." Cassie printed the receipt and placed it in the small black folder. The total came to $29.74. He took it, giving her a small nod. She moved on to wipe down another table, giving him his privacy. She saw him pat his back pockets, then the front. A flicker of confusion crossed his face. He stood up, checked the booth seat, then patted his pockets again, more frantically this time. A slow dawning horror crept over his features. He looked up, and his eyes met Cassie's across the room. The colour drained from his face. He was mortified. It was written in the rigid line of his spine, the flush creeping up his neck. He walked over to her, his head down. "Ma'am," he began, his voice barely a whisper. I seem to have made a mistake. I just got back stateside yesterday. I drove here from the base to see my family, and I must have left my wallet in my duffel bag in the car. My car? It just got towed. From the 2-hour parking zone across the street. I didn't see the sign. He gestured vaguely towards the window, where an empty parking space now sat under a street lamp. Cassie's heart sank. She glanced over at the manager's station near the kitchen. Mr. Garrett was watching them. His arms crossed his face, a mask of sour disapproval. Garrett was a man who lived by the corporate handbook. To him, compassion was a liability, and every customer was a potential thief. The soldier was still talking, his embarrassment palpable. "I'm so sorry. I can give you my name, my military ID number. Corporal Evan Holloway. I can call someone, but it might take a while. I can come back and pay tomorrow. I swear." Cassie looked at his earnest, desperate face, and all she could see was Michael. Michael, who had once called her from a bus station in a strange city, his voice tight with panic because his wallet had been stolen. She remembered the shame he'd felt, the feeling of being helpless and alone. Before she could even think it through, the words were out of her mouth. "Don't worry about it." Evan blinked. "What?" "It's on me," she said, forcing a casual tone. "Consider it a welcome home." "Ma'am, I can't let you do that," he said, shaking his head. "It's $30. That's not right. And it's not right that you come home after serving and your first meal is ruined by a tow truck and a forgotten wallet," she countered gently. "Please, let me do this. My brother, he was in the army, 101st Airborne. This is the least I can do." The mention of her brother seemed to break through his pride. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly. He looked at her, his tired blue eyes filled with a gratitude so profound it made her throat tighten. "I won't forget this," he said softly. "I'll be back tomorrow to pay you back. I promise." "Okay," she said, though she didn't really expect to see him again. She walked to the register, pulled her own worn leather wallet from her apron, and took out a 20, a 5, and 5 crumpled ones, almost all the cash she had on her. As she ran the payment, she could feel Garrett's eyes burning into her back. As soon as the soldier Evan was out the door, Garrett was on her like a hawk. "Done my office. Now." Cassie's stomach clenched. She knew this was coming. She followed his stiff-backed form into the tiny windowless office. "What exactly do you think you were doing?" Garrett hissed, his voice low and venomous. "He couldn't pay, Mr. Garrett. His wallet was in his car, and his car got towed. He's a soldier. He just got home. I don't care if he's general of the army." Garrett spat. "Policy is clear. In the event of a customer's inability to pay, management is to be notified immediately. We have procedures. We call the police." The police, for a misunderstanding. He promised to come back and pay, and you believed him. You paid for his meal with your own money on company time. Do you know what that looks like? Done. It looks like you're running a scam with your friends. "Oh, I forgot my wallet," and you cover them. It's theft. From the company. "That's not what happened. I was just trying to be decent." "Decency doesn't pay our food suppliers," he sneered. "I saw the whole thing. You didn't even try to follow procedure. This is your final warning. One more stunt like this, one more toe out of line, and you're out. Do you understand me? Yes, Mr. Garrett? She said, her voice small. Now get out, and I'm writing this up. It's going in your permanent file. Cassie walked out of the office, her hands shaking. Her act of kindness had just put a target on her back. She looked down at her empty wallet and thought of the $30 she'd likely never see again. For the first time all night, she wondered if being decent was a luxury she simply couldn't afford. The drive home was a blur of hazy streetlights and mounting panic. Garrett's words echoed in Cassie's ears. Final warning. Theft. Permanent file. The injustice of it burned in her chest, a hot, acrid feeling that mixed with the cold dread of her financial reality. The $30 she'd given away wasn't just $30. It was half the copay for her mother's medication. It was a full tank of gas. It was 3 days of groceries. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a walk-up building that always smelled faintly of damp laundry and boiled cabbage. It wasn't much, but it was clean, and it was home. She unlocked the door as quietly as possible, slipping inside. The only light came from a small lamp in the living room, casting a warm glow on her mother, who was asleep in her recliner, a worn patchwork quilt tucked around her frail frame. Catherine Dunn had been a force of nature, once a vibrant, laughing woman who could coax prize-winning roses from the stubborn soil of their tiny backyard. Multiple sclerosis had stolen that from her piece by piece, leaving her trapped in a body that no longer obeyed her commands. Some days were good. Many were bad. Today looked like a bad one. An empty mug sat on the side table next to a bottle of pills. Cassie knelt by the chair and gently brushed a stray strand of grey hair from her mother's forehead. A wave of love, so fierce it was almost painful, washed over her. This was why she did it. The double shifts, the aching feet, the condescension from men like Garrett. It was all for this woman to keep her comfortable, to keep her here. The thought of losing her job, of not being able to afford the medicines that kept her mother's worst symptoms at bay, was a physical terror that seized her heart and squeezed. She made her way to the tiny kitchen and opened the fridge. A half carton of milk, some eggs, a wilting lettuce head, and her mother's neatly labeled vials of medication. She stared at the contents, the reality of her precarious situation crashing down on her. She had gambled $30 on the word of a stranger, a soldier with haunted eyes. She had done it for Michael, for the memory of her brother. But Michael was gone, and her mother was here, depending on her. A sob caught in her throat, and she pressed her forehead against the cold refrigerator door, fighting for control. It wasn't fair. None of it was fair. The next morning, she woke up before dawn, her body sore and her mind heavy. She helped her mother with her morning routine, plastering on a cheerful expression she didn't feel. "You look tired, sweetie," Catherine said, her voice soft but perceptive. "Just a long night," Cassie replied, fluffing her mother's pillow. "Nothing to worry about." She arrived at the Evergreen Grill 15 minutes early for her shift. Her uniform crisp, her resolve hardened. She would be the perfect employee today. No mistakes, no drawing attention to herself. She just needed to get through the day, get her tips, and hope the soldier Evan was a man of his word. But trouble, it seemed, was waiting for her. Garrett was standing by the time clock, a self-satisfied smirk on his face. "Done. A word," he said, gesturing again towards his office. A cold knot formed in Cassie's stomach. This couldn't be good. She followed him in her heart, hammering against her ribs. He closed the door behind them. "Corporate has a zero-tolerance policy on mishandling of funds," he began without any preamble. He sat behind his cheap metal desk, steepling his fingers. It's a policy designed to protect the integrity of the business and ensure that all transactions are accounted for. Your little charitable act last night was a flagrant violation. I paid for it out of my own pocket, Mr. Garrett. The restaurant didn't lose a cent. You used the company's point-of-sale system to process a transaction for a customer you then paid for yourself. You subverted the proper channels for dealing with a customer who couldn't pay. For all I know, he was your boyfriend, and this is a weekly scam you run to get free food. That's a lie, and you know it. Cassie's voice rose indignation, momentarily overriding her fear. I've never seen that man before in my life. That's the problem, Dunn. I don't know that. And corporate doesn't like loose ends. They don't like employees who go off script. It makes them a liability. He leaned back, the smirk widening into a grin. It was clear he was enjoying this. I reviewed your file this morning. A late clock-in 2 months ago. A customer complaint last year about a cold side of fries. And now this. It paints a picture of a problematic employee. He was manufacturing a case against her. The late clock-in was because of a fender bender, and the customer complaint had been about the kitchen's mistake, not hers. She had been a model employee for 3 years. So effective immediately. Garrett said, his voice dripping with false regret. Reese Hospitality Group is terminating your employment. The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Air left her lungs. You're firing me for being kind. I'm firing you for being a liability and for violating company policy, he corrected her sharply. Hand over your apron and name tag. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you. Numbly, Cassie untied the strings of her apron, the familiar weight of it suddenly feeling foreign. She unpinned her name tag, Cassandra, and placed them both on his desk. The room felt small, suffocating. All she could think about was her mother. The prescription, the rent, the transmission. She walked out of the office in a daze. The other waitresses, Mariah and Jen, looked at her with wide, sympathetic eyes. They knew Garrett. They knew how he operated. Maria gave her arm a gentle squeeze as she passed. Cassie didn't go to the locker room. She just walked straight out the front door, the bell chiming her exit. The morning sun felt harsh and unforgiving. She stood on the sidewalk, the world continuing around her, cars rushing by, people heading to work, while her own life had just ground to a screeching, catastrophic halt. She had paid the price for her kindness, and the cost was everything. Corporal Evan Holloway woke up in a room that was both familiar and alien. It was his childhood bedroom, the walls still adorned with posters of baseball players, long since retired, and shelves filled with dusty trophies. But after a year of sleeping in a cot in a room with 12 other men, the silence was deafening, and the softness of the mattress felt strange against his back. His first full day back was a disorienting haze of well-meaning family questions he didn't want to answer, and the overwhelming sensory input of a world that had moved on without him. But through it all, one memory remained sharp and clear, the face of the waitress at the Evergreen Grill. Her name was Cassandra. He'd seen it on her name's tag. He remembered the weary kindness in her eyes, the way she hadn't made him feel like a charity case or a deadbeat. She'd seen his uniform, heard his story, and simply helped. Her mention of her brother, the soldier, had struck a chord deep within him. She understood. In a world that felt increasingly foreign, that brief moment of human connection had been an anchor. His promise to return and pay her back was more than just about the $30. It was a matter of honor. It was about showing her that her faith in him, a stranger, hadn't been misplaced. That afternoon, after retrieving his wallet and belongings from the impound lot, a bureaucratic nightmare that only soured his mood further, he knew he had to go back to the diner. and he decided he wasn't going alone. His father, Donovan Reese, was a man who moved through the world as if he owned it, which in many respects he did. As the founder and CEO of Reese Hospitality Group, Donovan was a titan of industry, a man whose name was whispered with a mixture of awe and fear in boardrooms across the country. He was also a man who had never understood his son's decision to enlist. A waste, Donovan had called it. You have a mind for business, for strategy. You're throwing it away to play soldier in the sand. Their relationship had been strained ever since a polite but chilly distance separating them. Now Evan wanted his father to see something. He felt the old man had lost sight of genuine, uncalculated human decency. He found his father in his sprawling home office, a space of mahogany leather and glass that overlooked a meticulously manicured garden. Donovan was on the phone, his voice a low, commanding rumble as he finalized some multi-million-dollar deal. When he hung up, he looked at Evan, his expression a familiar mix of paternal pride and deep-seated disapproval. Evan, you're looking well. A bit thin. It's the cuisine, Evan said dryly. Listen, Dad, I need a favor. I'd like you to come with me somewhere. Donovan raised a skeptical eyebrow. I'm in the middle of closing the acquisition of the entire Vivaldi hotel chain. I don't have time for... It's important, Evan interrupted, his tone firm. It's about what you're always talking about, the value of good people, the core of a business. I want to show you something. Someone, intrigued by his son's uncharacteristic insistence, and perhaps seeing a rare opportunity to connect Donovan, relented with a sigh. Fine. 20 minutes. They rode in Donovan's sleek black sedan, the silence thick with unspoken words. Evan directed him not to the upscale restaurants his father owned, but to the unassuming parking lot of the Evergreen Grill and Bar. Donovan stared at the building, a look of faint disgust on his face. This is one of ours, isn't it? The mid-market family dining division. I haven't set foot in one in a decade. This is it, Evan said, getting out of the car. They walked in the same bell chiming their arrival. The lunch rush was in full swing, the air thick with the smell of fried food and the clatter of plates. A different waitress, a harried-looking woman named Jen, greeted them. We'd like a table, but first I'm looking for one of your employees, Evan said politely. Her name is Cassandra Dunn. She was working last night. Jen's friendly expression faltered. She glanced nervously towards the manager's office. Cassie, you should probably talk to our manager, Mr. Garrett. Just then, Garrett himself emerged from the office, his chest puffed out, a look of supreme self-importance on his face. He saw Evan, and a flicker of recognition, followed by a sneer, crossed his features. Can I help you? Garrett asked, his tone implying he very much did not want to. Yes, Evan said, his voice calm and even. I was here last night. I'm Corporal Evan Holloway. I believe you saw me. I came back to pay my bill and to thank the waitress who helped me, Cassandra. He pulled out his wallet and placed 2 $20 bills on the counter. This is for my bill and for her. Garrett looked at the money, then back at Evan, his lips curling into a smug smile. Well, I'm afraid you're a day late and $1 short, Corporal. As for Cassandra, she is no longer an employee of the Evergreen Grill. Evan froze. What do you mean she's no longer an employee? I mean she was terminated this morning, Garrett said, clearly relishing the moment. For cause. Donovan, who had been observing the exchange with impatient boredom, finally spoke up. For cause? What cause? Garrett turned to the older, impeccably dressed man beside the soldier. And you are... He's with me, Evan said, his voice dropping a dangerous edge, creeping into it. What was the cause? Violation of company financial policies, Garrett said breezily. Theft, to be precise, related to her interaction with you, as a matter of fact. But I'm not at liberty to discuss internal HR matters." The air went still. Evan stared at Garrett, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. She hadn't just been kind, she had been punished for it. Evan had cost this woman her job. A cold, furious rage, the kind he hadn't felt since he was overseas, began to build in his chest. Theft. Evan repeated his voice, dangerously low. "She paid for my meal out of her own pocket, because my car was towed and I didn't have my wallet." She showed compassion. "You're calling that theft. I'm calling it a violation of the Reese Hospitality Group Corporate Handbook, Section 4, Subsection B, Paragraph 3, Garrett retorted, puffing his chest out. "Rules are in place for a reason, to protect the integrity of the brand." He said the name Reese Hospitality Group with such reverence, such misplaced pride. And in that moment, Evan saw his opening. He looked from Garrett's smug face to his father, whose expression had shifted from boredom to sharp, focused attention. The dots were connecting in Donovan Reese's formidable mind. The storm was about to break over the evergreen grill, and Mr. Garrett had no idea he was standing directly in its path, the name of his own company spoken with such oily reverence by the pompous little manager landed on Donovan Reese like a spark on dry tinder. For the past 10 minutes, he had been a passive observer, an impatient father indulging his son's strange errand. Now he was the CEO, and one of his stores run by one of his managers was standing in the middle of a situation that reeked of incompetence and poor judgment. He saw the fury in his son's eyes, a controlled burn that he recognized from Evan's teenage years. But beneath it, he also saw a deep personal shame. Evan felt responsible. This manager, this Garrett, had taken an employee's act of decency towards his son, a soldier, and twisted it into a fireable offense. It wasn't just bad management, it was an insult. "Let me be clear," Donovan said, stepping forward. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the diner's ambient noise like a surgeon's scalpel. Every head in the immediate vicinity turned. "You fired an employee because she personally paid for a soldier's meal." Garrett, still oblivious, squared his shoulders, ready to assert his authority. "Sir, as I said, it was a direct violation of policy. I am responsible for upholding the standards of Reese Hospitality Group." Donovan finished for him, his voice dropping to a glacial calm. "I'm familiar with them. I wrote half of them." A flicker of confusion crossed Garrett's face. He looked from Donovan's expensive custom-tailored suit to his polished Italian leather shoes. A seed of doubt was planted. "I don't believe we've met," Garrett stammered, his bravado beginning to crack. "I'm the regional manager's new hire, Frank Garrett." "I know who you are, Mr. Garrett," Donovan said. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a slim carbon fiber wallet, and extracted a business card. He didn't hand it to Garrett. He placed it on the counter with a quiet finality. "Donovan Reese, founder and CEO." The color drained from Frank Garrett's face. He looked at the card, his eyes wide with disbelief and terror. The embossed gold letters seemed to shimmer under the fluorescent lights. Donovan Reese, CEO, Reese Hospitality Group. He looked up at Donovan, then at Evan, the decorated soldier, and back to Donovan. The connection slammed into him like a freight train. This wasn't just any soldier. This was the boss's son. Garrett began to tremble. His entire world, built on the flimsy foundation of middle management power, was collapsing in on itself. Mr. Reese." "Sir." He sputtered, his voice a choked squeak. I had no idea. I was simply following protocol. If I had known who he was, and that," Donovan said, his voice like chipping ice, "is precisely the problem. It shouldn't matter who he is. He could have been any soldier, any customer. You didn't see a man who served his country. You saw a liability. You didn't see an employee with compassion. You saw a rule breaker. You used the rule book not as a guideline for good business, but as a weapon to exert your own petty authority. He turned to his son. Evan, you said you wanted to show me something. I believe I'm starting to see it. He then looked back at Garrett, his gaze utterly unforgiving. You claim she was fired for theft. Let me ask you, Mr. Garrett, who was the victim of this so-called theft. The company's register balanced, did it not? She paid the full amount. Well, yes, but the principle of it, the potential for fraud, Garrett stammered, grasping at straws. The potential for fraud, Donovan scoffed. You fired a woman likely a good employee based on a hypothetical situation you invented in your own mind while ignoring the reality of the situation, a simple, decent act. Tell me, Mr. Garrett, in your tenure as manager, what has the staff turnover rate been at this location? Garrett paled further. I'd have to check the files, sir. Don't bother. I'll have them on my desk within the hour, Donovan said dismissively. You are to go to your office. You will not speak to any other employees. You will wait there until you hear from my regional vice president. I assure you it will be the last conversation you have as an employee of my company. Garrett looked as if he might faint. He opened his mouth, then closed it, and without another word, turned and scurried back to his office, closing the door behind him like a condemned man. The entire front of the restaurant had fallen silent. The waitstaff and the nearby customers had witnessed the entire exchange. Jen, the waitress who had greeted them, was staring wide-eyed, a tray of drinks forgotten in her hand. Donovan turned his attention to her. His demeanor softened slightly, shifting from ruthless executive to inquisitive owner. You knew Cassandra, he stated more than asked. Yes, sir, Jen whispered. We all do. She's the best one here, always picks up shifts for people, always helps out. She didn't deserve that. Does she have a phone number? An address? Donovan asked. I need to speak with her. Jen nodded quickly, rushing to a small desk and scribbling Cassie's details on the back of a guest check. She handed it to Donovan. He took the slip of paper and looked at his son. The anger in Evan's eyes had been replaced by a quiet vindication, but also concern. What are you going to do? Evan asked. I'm going to fix it, Donovan said, his jaw set. You brought me here to see the core of my business. You were right. It seems I have a rot I need to cut out, and I believe I've just been introduced to the cure. He pulled out his phone, not to call the regional VP, but to dial a number for his executive assistant. Brenda, he said into the phone, his voice all business once more. Cancel my 1 o'clock with the Vivaldi team, clear my afternoon, and get me a full performance and employee relations file on the Evergreen Grill location has 740. I want everything. Turnover rates, customer complaints, supplier reports, and a full work history for an employee named Frank Garrett. And I want it an hour ago. He hung up. He and Evan stood in the middle of the restaurant he owned, but hadn't truly seen in years. He had built an empire of thousands of these places, a vast network of policies and profit margins. It had taken his own son returning from a war to show him the one thing he'd forgotten to factor into his balance sheet's humanity. And now he was about to make a major reinvestment. Cassie spent the rest of the morning in a fog of despair. She sat at her small kitchen table, the termination slip, a cold, impersonal piece of paper lying in front of her. How was she going to tell her mother? How was she going to pay the bills that were already piling up? Each thought was a new wave of panic threatening to pull her under. She jumped when her phone buzzed, the screen lighting up with an unknown number. Her first instinct was to ignore it, assuming it was a debt collector. But something made her answer. "Hello," she said, her voice hoarse. "Am I speaking with Ms. Cassandra Dunn?" a crisp, professional female voice asked. "Yes. Who is this?" "My name is Brenda Vance. I'm the executive assistant to Mr. Donovan Reese, the CEO of Reese Hospitality Group. Mr. Reese would like to schedule a meeting with you this afternoon." Cassie's mind went blank. Reese Hospitality Group. The CEO. It had to be a cruel joke. A meeting about what? "It pertains to the events of this morning at the Evergreen Grill. Mr. Reese feels there has been a significant misunderstanding that he wishes to rectify personally. He has sent a car to your address. It should be arriving in approximately 30 minutes. A car. The CEO, Cassie, felt a dizzying sense of vertigo. I don't understand." "Mr. Reese will explain everything, Ms. Dunn. Will you be available?" What choice did she have? "Yes," she managed to say. "Yes, I'll be there." She hung up the phone, her mind racing. What could the CEO possibly want with her? Was this some bizarre corporate way of making her sign an NDA? Was Garrett trying to sue her for slander? She was terrified, but a tiny, fragile flicker of hope ignited within her. Maybe this wasn't the end of the story. Meanwhile, in a glass-walled conference room on the 50th floor of Reese Tower downtown, Donovan Reese was dismantling Frank Garrett's career piece by piece. The files Brenda had sent over painted a damning picture. In the 6 months Garrett had been manager of location, 714 staff, turnover had skyrocketed by 300%. Customer satisfaction scores had plummeted. There were 3 formal complaints filed against him by former employees, citing bullying tactics, unfair scheduling, and verbal harassment. He was a cancer in the organization, and Donovan had been completely unaware. Evan sat in the corner of the conference room watching his father work. He'd never seen him like this up close. Donovan was relentless, dissecting every report, his questions to the regional VP on speakerphone, sharp and precise. He wasn't just angry, he was offended that such mediocrity and malice had been allowed to fester under his name. Why wasn't this flagged? Donovan demanded of the VP. A 300% turnover rate isn't a statistic, it's a cry for help from that store. You saw the numbers. Why didn't you act? The VP, a man named Henderson, stammered on the other end of the line. "Sir, the store's profit margins were stable. Mr. Garrett was very good at cutting costs. He was cutting costs by running his staff into the ground." Donovan thundered, slamming a hand on the polished table. "People are not line items, Henderson. They are the engine of this company. You get down to that store. You personally oversee the transition, and you will re-interview every employee who quit or was fired in the last 6 months. If they want their jobs back, they get them. Understood? Yes, Mr. Reese. Crystal clear." Donovan hung up and pinched the bridge of his nose, looking suddenly weary. He glanced at Evan. "You were right. I've been living up here in this tower for too long. I look at spreadsheets and profit projections, but I've forgotten what it looks like on the ground." "It's not too late to change that," Evan said quietly. Just then, Brenda's voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Reese, Miss Dunn has arrived." "Send her in," Donovan said, standing up and straightening his tie. He looked at Evan. "I think it's best if you're here for this. You're a part of this story." Cassie was escorted into the conference room, and she felt her breath catch in her throat. The room was larger than her entire apartment, with a panoramic view of the city that seemed to stretch on forever. At the far end of a long, gleaming table stood 2 men. One was the soldier from the diner, Evan Holloway. The other was an older man, powerfully built and dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her car. He commanded the room simply by standing in it. "Ms. Dunn." The older man said, his voice the same one she'd heard on the phone with Garrett. "Thank you for coming. I am Donovan Reese. And you've met my son, Evan." Cassie's eyes darted from Donovan to Evan, the pieces finally impossibly falling into place. The soldier was the CEO's son. Her knees felt weak. "Please have a seat," Donovan said, gesturing to a chair. She sat down woodenly, her hands clenched in her lap. "First," Donovan began, his tone serious and direct, "I want to offer you my deepest and most sincere apology. What happened to you today was an absolute failure of my organization. It was unjust, unprofessional, and it never should have happened." Cassie was so stunned she couldn't speak. "Mr. Garrett," he continued, "is no longer with the company. The regional vice president who oversaw his mismanagement is on thin ice and is currently at the store beginning a complete overhaul of the location's culture. But that doesn't fix what was done to you." He slid a file across the table. "This is your employee file, I've read it. 3 years of dedicated service. Excellent performance reviews up until 6 months ago. Consistently, one of the highest-rated servers by customers. You were by all accounts a model employee." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "My son told me what you said to him, that your brother was in the army. He told me that you didn't help him, because you expected to be paid back, but because it was the right thing to do." "He reminded me of my brother, Michael," Cassie whispered, finding her voice. "He died in Afghanistan." A silence fell over the room, heavy with respect. Evan looked down at the table, his own expression pained. "Your kindness, Ms. Dunn, is a quality this company should be rewarding, not punishing," Donovan said. "So I am not going to offer you your job back." Cassie's heart plummeted. She had misunderstood everything. This was just a formal apology before they sent her on her way. "Because," Donovan continued, leaning forward, "frankly, you're wasted as a waitress. An act like yours, that kind of character, that's leadership. It's the very soul of what hospitality is supposed to be. Something men like Garrett, and to my shame, even I have forgotten." He slid another folder across the table. This one was thicker. "I am offering you a new position. We have a corporate management training program. It's a 2-year fast-track course that grooms our most promising employees for regional management positions. I am offering you a spot in the next class. It comes with a full salary benefits and a housing stipend. At the end of it, you would be qualified to run a whole district of restaurants, to ensure that what happened to you never happens to another one of our employees again." Cassie stared at the folder, her mind unable to process the words. Management training, a salary housing stipend. It was a world away from worrying about her mother's copay. "But that's not all," Donovan added. He had clearly done his homework. "Evan also mentioned you have a dream of opening your own bakery someday. A tribute to your brother, I believe." Cassie looked up, shocked that Evan would have told him that. She had only mentioned it in passing conversation while he ate. "Reese Hospitality Group has a venture capital arm for promising new culinary startups," Donovan said, a faint smile on his lips. "Consider it open to a business proposal from you whenever you're ready. We can provide the startup capital, the business support, everything you need. You can do the management program, learn the business from the inside out, and when you're ready to open Michael's Bakery, or whatever you choose to call it, we will be your first investors." Tears welled in Cassie's eyes, blurring the incredible view of the city. She looked from the life-changing offer on the table to the CEO who was giving her this impossible chance, to the young soldier who had started it all. He gave her a small, encouraging nod. It was too much. The whiplash of the day from the despair of being fired to this unbelievable stratospheric offer was overwhelming. The tears spilled over tracing silent paths down her cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness or fear anymore. They were tears of shock, of relief, and of a hope so bright it almost hurt to look at. The silence in the conference room was filled only by Cassie's quiet, incredulous sobs. Donovan and Evan waited patiently, understanding that she needed a moment to absorb the tectonic shift that had just occurred in her life. This wasn't just a job offer, it was a lifeline, a future she had never dared to dream of, laid out before her on a polished mahogany table. Finally, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand and took a deep, shuddering breath. I don't know what to say, she stammered, looking at Donovan. Why would you do all of this for me? Donovan Reese leaned back in his chair, his corporate armor seeming to fall away, revealing the father and the man beneath. Ms. Dunn, Cassandra. For the last 20 years, I've built this company on a foundation of profit margins, market analysis, and growth projections. I measure success in percentages and stock prices. Yesterday, my son walked into one of my restaurants after a year at war. And he was met with two things. First, he was met with your brand of hospitality, the real kind, the kind that is about human connection, empathy and dignity. Then he was met with my brand of hospitality, a rigid, soulless rule book enforced by a petty tyrant that resulted in your termination. He gestured towards Evan. My son risked his life for his country, a choice I fought against, a choice I never understood. He came back, and in his first 24 hours home, he showed me a more valuable business lesson than any I've learned in a boardroom. He showed me that character is the ultimate asset. You have it in abundance. My company, it seems, has a severe shortage. This isn't charity, Cassandra. This is a strategic investment in the single most valuable resource. I have a person of integrity. Cassie looked over at Evan, who had been listening intently. He offered her a warm, genuine smile. I told you I wouldn't forget what you did, he said. I just didn't realize my dad would take it this seriously. When I commit to a course correction, I do it thoroughly, Donovan said with a hint of his old gruffness. But there was a new light in his eyes. My mother, Cassie said suddenly, the practicalities of her life rushing back in. She's sick. She has MS. I'm her caregiver. This training program. Where is it I can't leave her? It's based right here in this city, in this building, in fact, Donovan said, already anticipating her concern. And the benefits package includes top-tier health insurance that will cover your mother as your dependent. Comprehensive coverage. The best doctors, the best care. That is non-negotiable. That was the final piece. The worry that was a constant weight on her shoulders, the fear for her mother's health and well-being suddenly lifted. For the first time in years, Cassie felt like she could breathe. She looked down at the folder, then back up at the two men who had, in the span of a few hours, completely rewritten her future. Yes, she said, her voice clear and steady. I accept. I accept everything. And I won't let you down. I have no doubt about that, Donovan said, a genuine smile finally breaking across his face. He stood and extended his hand. Cassie stood as well and shook it, her small hand enveloped in his. It felt like sealing a pact that was about more than just business. As they wrapped up the meeting discussing the practical next steps with Brenda, Evan walked Cassie towards the elevator. Are you okay? He asked, his voice gentle. This has been a lot. A lot doesn't even begin to cover it. She laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. Evan, thank you. You didn't have to do any of this. You could have just paid me back the $30 and walked away. After what Garrett told me. No, he said, shaking his head. That wasn't right. What he did to you was wrong, and I caused it. I had to make it right. You didn't cause it, Cassie insisted. A man like that. He was just looking for an excuse. You just happened to be the one who provided it. She paused, then added, You and your father. You seem closer now. Evan glanced back towards the conference room, where his father was already back on the phone, but his posture seemed different, less rigid. Yeah, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. We had more real conversations today than we've had in the last 5 years. Maybe we both just needed to be reminded of what's actually important. The elevator doors opened. As Cassie stepped in, she turned back to him. When I open my bakery, you get free coffee for life. He grinned, the tired look in his eyes, finally gone, replaced by a genuine warmth. I'll hold you to that. As the elevator descended, Cassie watched the floors flash by, the city spreading out below her. She felt like she was floating. She had started the day, fired, broke, and hopeless. She was ending it with a new career, a secure future for her mother, and the promise of a dream she thought was lost forever. It all started with a simple choice in a worn-out diner booth. A choice to see a person instead of a problem. A choice to offer kindness when it was least affordable. She had gambled $30 on a stranger, and in return, she had been given back her life, and then some. 18 months later, the aroma of freshly baked bread, roasted coffee, and caramelized sugar filled the air on a bustling corner of downtown. A beautifully painted sign hung above the door, its elegant script reading, Michael's Corner. Inside the bakery was bright and welcoming, with exposed brick walls, comfortable seating, and a large sunlit window. Behind the gleaming glass counter, an array of pastries, cakes, and artisan breads were displayed like jewels, and behind that counter, tying the string on a box of croissants, was Cassie Dunn. She looked different. The tired, worried lines on her face were gone, replaced by the confident calm of a business owner. Her time in the Reese Hospitality Group's management program had been a revelation. She had a natural talent for logistics and a deep, intuitive understanding of customer service that couldn't be taught. She absorbed every lesson, her quiet determination impressing all of her instructors, not least of all, Donovan Reese himself. True to his word, when she had presented her business plan for the bakery, he had become her primary investor, not as a handout, but as a sound business partnership. He had given her the tools, but she had built this place from the ground up, infusing every detail with the love she had for her late brother. Her mother Catherine was there too. Seated at a small table by the window, she looked healthier and more vibrant than she had in years. The new insurance had given her access to cutting-edge treatments that had drastically improved her quality of life. She now served as the bakery's unofficial greeter and matriarch, her warm smile a staple of Michael's Corner. The bell above the door chimed, and Cassie looked up to see a familiar face. Evan Holloway, now a civilian, walked in wearing a Henley shirt and jeans. He had finished his tour of duty and was now using his GI Bill to study structural engineering at the local university. He was a regular at the bakery, stopping by at least twice a week. "The usual boss?" Cassie asked with a grin. "You know it," he replied, leaning against the counter. "Black coffee and one of whatever you experimented with this morning." Their friendship had deepened over the past year and a half. They had an easy, comfortable rapport built on a foundation of shared experience and mutual respect. He had helped her move furniture into the bakery. She had helped him proofread papers on tensile strength. It was a simple, supportive bond that was slowly, quietly blossoming into something more. As Cassie prepared his coffee, another figure appeared at the door. Donovan Reese entered, looking less like a corporate titan and more like a proud father. He no longer wore the armor of his expensive suits on the weekend, preferring a simple cashmere sweater. His relationship with Evan had transformed completely. They spoke almost every day, their old tensions replaced by a newfound understanding. "Donovan, I saved you a morning bun," Cassie said cheerfully. "You'd better have," he grumbled good-naturedly, clapping Evan on the shoulder. "Smells incredible in here as always." He wasn't just an investor anymore. He had become a mentor and a friend. He would often stop by not to check the books, but to sit with a coffee and just watch the thriving community Cassie had built. He'd implemented sweeping changes at Reese Hospitality Group, creating a new Cassandra Dunn initiative that empowered managers to reward, not punish, acts of employee compassion, with a fund set aside specifically for it. He had learned his lesson. The company was more profitable than ever, and staff morale was at an all-time high. The three of them sat at a table together, the former waitress, the soldier, and the billionaire. They were an unlikely trio, their lives woven together by a single act of kindness in a roadside diner. "You know," Donovan said, looking around the bustling bakery, "I spent my whole life trying to build an empire. Turns out the best part of it wasn't something I built at all. It was something I just had the good sense to invest in." He looked pointedly at Cassie, his eyes full of genuine admiration. Cassie smiled a warmth, spreading through her chest, that had nothing to do with the hot ovens. She looked at Evan, at Donovan, at her mother, chatting happily with another customer. Her life wasn't just stable anymore. It was full. It was happy. She had learned that value wasn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the connections we make, and the kindness we choose to show, especially when we think we have nothing left to give. For $30, she had bought a stranger a meal. And in doing so, she had purchased a future more wonderful than she could have ever imagined. The story of Cassandra, Evan, and Donovan is a powerful testament to the ripple effect of a single selfless act. It's a reminder that in a world that often measures worth by the size of our bank accounts, the true currency of life is compassion. Cassandra's decision wasn't about money, it was about dignity. It proves that you don't need to be wealthy or powerful to change someone's life. You just need to be willing to see the humanity in front of you. Her story started with a $60 risk and ended with a priceless reward, a dream realized, a family healed, and a corporate giant reminded of its own heart. If this story moved you and reaffirmed your faith in the quiet power of everyday kindness, please help us share this message. Click the like button, share this video with your friends and family, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories that inspire and uplift. What part of Cassie's journey resonated with you the most? Let us know in the comments below. Thank you for watching.